that Fritz can probably talk about is the history of brewing in San Francisco. That there used to be, this was a big brewing center for the country, and there was a malt house located just down the road that was our first supplier of malt, and I know you purchased malt from Dollar Schweitzer for many years as well. But there was a thriving San Francisco brewing industry, and now, at one point, Fritz was the last of them that survived through, I guess, from around the time of the earthquake or after that, when a lot of breweries opened up.
Well, my knowledge of the early history of brewing here is not all that particular. I've read and heard and thought and seen stories. I think what I used to say is true, which is that today the breweries were small. It would be perhaps the equivalent, I used to say, of a gas station today. How many gas stations are there in San Francisco? Well, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 maybe. They're less and less, of course. They're bigger now than they were. And breweries were everywhere. Any town of any size would have had 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 breweries. And of course, San Francisco was a town of real size and very rapidly. We were joking about that the other day. You know, 100,000 people arrived in San Francisco the first year. You realize that? And with no planning. Imagine if somebody said, we're going to have 100,000 people go to this remote place. Well, the government would have to step in. What about boots? How are they going to get boots? And has anybody planned on the shovels? You're going to need at least 50,000 shovels. Believe it or not, 100,000 people came here. And of course, many went off to the gold fields. In the first year, imagine, we were looking at a photograph taken of the city of San Francisco in about 1878, we think. A panorama of the whole city, the camera that circled around, very famous photographer. It looks like an enormous city. 25 years after there was nobody here. Pretty amazing. So, you can imagine there were bakeries and breweries and butcher shops and shovel shops and boot shops and boot makers and all the rest of it overnight. And there were many, many breweries. I don't know, I've seen the number, I think 18 or 28 or something, but certainly was. And another interesting factor, which is that we have good brewing weather here. We were talking earlier tonight about the temperature that beers are made. Lager beers, of course, which is a modern thing, are made at much cooler temperatures than beers used to be made. It used to be that beers were made not at a specific temperature. Beers were made at the temperature. You know, it is the temperature out there. But my wife and I like to joke about that. We call each other and ask each other, what do you suppose the temperature was on the Golden Gate Bridge? I just crossed the bridge. Guess what the temperature was? It's always 54, 55, or 56. You know, not really, not always, but often. I can tell you right now, it's probably 50, 55 out there on the Golden Gate. This is very good weather for a lot of things. Food processing, winemaking, brewing. I read the other day that the art of anatomy was taught, guess which season they taught anatomy? Winter. Think about it. So we had wonderful brewing weather here in San Francisco and along the coast, if only because you could save money. In other words, you might have refrigeration by 1880, but you wouldn't need as much because it's cool outside. Pretty amazing weather, really.
They're serving this next beer, which is Fritz's as well, which is the anniversary beer for your being in this building for 30 years now. So it's sort of a dual anniversary today. It's our 30th year in business.
So this is the Humming Ale? Yes. Yeah. We have a history here of celebrating our anniversary. Ken is celebrating 30 years. We celebrated last fall 30 years in this brewery. We moved here from the old, what we call the old brewery. And it was a big moment for us because we had built a new brewery at the old brewery. I like to say it was the most modern small brewery by far in the world at the old brewery. It didn't look like it because the building was crummy. But boy, if you knew brewing and you saw that we were centrifuging and sterile filtering and flash pasteurizing, and you could see there was nothing really like it in the world in many ways, of any size. So when we moved here, it was a new brewery, but it was our second new brewery, and we knew what we wanted. We went to Europe, as Ken said, and bought a brew house. And this this was a dream come true for us. And at our 5th anniversary of our first brew here was August 13, 79. 5th anniversary, we brewed our wheat beer, which was the first wheat beer made in America as far as we know in modern times. And then in our 20th anniversary, we were too busy to do anything on the 10th, I think. We did, darn it, I can't remember, something unusual on the 20th. Oh, the Ninkasi project, the Sumerian beer project, some of you will know about that. We had a wonderful time recreating an ancient beer from about 4000 BC, very seriously trying to bring our brewing knowledge to bear on the written documents that we have about brewing in those days. It was not just goofy, it was a real serious attempt. That was great fun. So this year was our 30th anniversary, and we thought we'd better do something. And John and Mark and some others had been abroad, I don't know how much do we say about that, and had tasted a beer made with a hop, an unusual hop from New Zealand, and which they thought was really quite remarkable. And so we decided, let's just wing it, we'll try it. And it's our anniversary. It's like the beer that Ken brewed with my council for their third, the stout. It's not necessarily a long-term project. Originally it was a one-of-a-kind project. But I'll tell you that it was such a great success that we're tempted to do it again. And humming was kind of a joke. It was an expression that was apparently used in literature. There were references in poems to a humming ale. Nobody knew quite why, but maybe it was bubbling, or maybe it just was strong in alcohol, and if you drank it, then you started humming. Nobody's too sure. But it kind of amused me, because when we started up in this brewery, to our great surprise and great delight, from the very first day, we were humming. Things worked. You know that feeling, Ken. It worked, and it was a thrill. Mike, you were here. Remember? Oh, boy. It was magic. It was hard. I mean, we'll never describe what it was like. We had planned to close the old brewery stop brewing at the old brewery and keep bottling, and then start brewing here, and then eventually stop bottling over there and move some of the equipment over. It was a great plan, but like Eisenhower said, plans are everything, and plans turn out to be useless. It turned out that we were shut down for months and months and months in the summer of '79. There was no beer of any kind from Anchor, which was great from another point of view, but that's another story. There was a big health crisis, and there was suddenly something in the beer that scared everybody. And we were afraid that if they tested our beer, it would have the highest numbers of any beer in America, because we were the only all malt beer in America, and it came from the malt. Anyway, so there wasn't any Anchor Steve to test, which was very clever, very lucky. Anyway, so when we finally started up, we were really humming, and so the humming ale, it's, I guess the one thing we could say as brewers is it's much higher in IBUs than it seems to taste. To our great surprise, it's, if you knew the IBUs, and what are they, John? Is it 55? 65. We don't think it tastes anywhere near that high. It's something about the hops, about the way we did it with the dry hopping and everything. It's been a kind of a surprise to us at how much it's succeeded. I think you've had a similar experience with beers you've done. Some have done really wonderfully, and so I'm surprised you're not doing so well. Yeah,
part of it's varietal, part of it's how they're used, part of it's the balance. Either accentuates or sort of masks the bitterness. I want to talk a little bit about humming, but not in the same way. In that I was the beneficiary of Fritz's old bottling line, or at least parts of his old bottling line. So when he moved from the old facility over here, we took his old Meyer 28 spout filler, which Fritz had bought from the Siemens Brewery in Chicago, which was an Al Capone, reported Al Capone owned or controlled brewery. And it's still running today. It's still humming today, hopefully. But it was a huge step up for us. So we were the beneficiary of as Fritz would grow. We were fortunate enough to end up with a filter that he had in his old plant. I don't know if you remember that little Schenck 40 by 40, I think it was. Yeah, no plate frame. Maybe it should be smaller than 20 by 20. Maybe.
Yeah, just plate. Yeah, no frames.
Yeah. So anyway, so part of our success has been Fritz's success. So as he grew, we were able to benefit from some of the old equipment. So enjoy this next round.